immediately had a connection with him because he himself had experienced domestic violence with his mum and his dad, because his dad used to beat up his mum. So he kind of related to me and he understood where I was coming from, so instantly we had a connection. And then as soon as we got together, it happened really fast. He moved into my mum's house and he moved in, and I could say straight away I could see the signs of abuse. It's not the norm, shall I say, for a 15-year-old to be drinking spirits excessively, and he used to do this. And at first, I don't know, some small part of me thought it was kind of cool because he could afford alcohol and he was 15, and that is what everyone our age was doing. But the more time we spent together and the more time we spent alone together and the more he would drink and the more I'd see how he would get, he'd become very antisocial. He wouldn't want to talk. He'd just isolate himself until he'd come to a point where he's completely intoxicated, and then he'd want to start talking to me, but he'd start accusing me, and he'd start accusing me of cheating. He'd spit at me and he'd call me names, he'd pull my hair. And then when he'd done this for hours and hours, he'd then tell me that it was time to go to bed, and I would just get into bed because I thought, we're going to go to sleep and this is all going to be over now. But then he'd start trying to take my clothes off and try to touch me, but I didn't want him to, but he would carry on and he wouldn't stop. And then he would just force himself on me. The whole time I was crying and I was telling him to stop, and he wouldn't stop, and he'd keep going. And then afterwards he'd try and show me affection, which I didn't want him to. I was just disgusted with him, and I'd just go to sleep and I'd promise myself, when I wake up I'm going to leave him. I'd go to sleep and he'd wake up before me, and he would start to tell me how sorry he was, and he didn't really remember what had happened, and it was just the drink. It was just the drink, and he's going to make it up to me, and everything's going to be better. He's going to change. He's going to stop treating me like this. And because throughout the relationship that's all I ever wanted to hear, I would accept it with caution because I'd heard it so many times, but I would accept it. And then for the next couple of hours he was lovely. He was the most loving man. He would show me the most amount of affection. He just would be overly loving towards me. But then when he saw that I was less resistant and I was becoming more submissive towards him, he'd slowly start to change. And this is within a couple of hours. He'd start changing back to his normal self. He'd start giving me looks. He'd start making sly digs. And then that was it. It was just back to normal. And I'd say it was worse when he was drinking, and it was worse when he took the drugs. At the start it was mainly when he was drinking and doing drugs that he would abuse me. But then as the years went on, he didn't even need the drugs or the drink anymore. He just naturally would just switch. There was times when he'd have nightmares, and in the middle of the night he would punch me and slap me, and I'd wake up out of my sleep and wonder what's going on. And he would then tell me to get out, and he would literally, I'd be half naked and he'd tell me to get out, and he would take me towards, pull my hair, push me out the door and tell me I'm a whore, I'm dirt, to get out. And then because I was so scared, it didn't matter what I was wearing. If I didn't have any clothes on, I would just try and run away, and I would run and he would chase after me, and then he would drag me back. And if he couldn't get hold of me, he'd shout to me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, and until I calmed down, until I followed him. But as soon as we got back into the house, within a couple of minutes it started again. And the worst thing about it was, he wouldn't let me go, and all I wanted to do was leave, and he wouldn't let me go. He'd keep swearing at me. I was literally backed into a corner. I was in a corner all huddled up, and he would just carry on. He'd spit at me, he'd kick me, he'd pull my hair, throw things at me. Just constant abuse, just kept going with the abuse, just telling me I'm worth nothing, and just belittle me and make me feel about this small. And he'd keep doing it for hours and hours and hours. Sometimes it felt like I was a terrorist in a camp. Like, that's how he'd make me feel. There was times when he used little things, like he had this little electric flex, and he was so adamant that I was cheating on him and that I was doing something, I was up to something, and he'd sit there interrogating me, and he'd literally hold it to me, threatening me if I wasn't telling him something. If I didn't admit to something, he was threatening to kill me. He was threatening to do all kinds of things, and the look that was in his eyes was pure evil. When I looked into his eyes, and I used to try and kind of snap him out of it, to make him realise it's me, I'm meant to be the woman that you love, we're together, I love you. To make him snap out of it, I'd look at him, and all I could see in his eyes was pure evil. It was just blank. It was just evil. And this went on for a long time. It would happen a lot. And as the years progressed, and he started taking drugs more, and he started drinking more, and because he was selling drugs, he got into a lot of trouble where he'd get robbed and beaten up and all these things. But because I was so close to him, I used to get the brunt of it. And certain things would happen to him where he'd get robbed by certain people, and he would think that I'd set him up, and he just turned into a really horrible person. But everyone on the outside, everyone just thought, they didn't realise, they didn't understand. Even the friends around him, the way when we broke up and I would manage to get away and leave, they would all, he would spin the story as to say it was me who was in the wrong, and I left him because I was a slag and I wanted to sleep around, and it wasn't that. It was because I couldn't take the abuse. I loved him and I wanted to make it work, and I tried everything. I understood what he went through because I myself experienced domestic violence when I was growing up, and I understood the impact that it had on my life. So that's why I think I felt guilty, and I kept going back because I thought somehow we could get through this. And I would say to him, you know, you need counselling. I understand that you've been through a lot. I understand that you drink and you take drugs to escape, but you know, if you want this to work, you need to seek professional help. And he would say yes, just to get me back. He would say yes. He would promise me everything. He would say everything, anything I wanted to hear, he was saying it. I would do everything. I'm going to change. I'm never going to do this to you again. And I would accept it. And then within a couple hours or a couple of days, it would go back to the same, and I would be sitting there while he's abusing me, and I would just be thinking to myself, I knew this was going to happen, but why did I put myself through this? Why did I continue to allow him to abuse me? Why didn't I get away when I had the chance? What did I think was going to change? But I just wanted to believe in him. I wanted to believe in us. I wanted to prove the world wrong, because everyone around, in regards to my family, the people that knew the other side of the story, they didn't believe that we was meant to be together. They could see what he was doing. They could see how he was abusing me.